The laundry house behind the Blackwood mansion was where I spent 18 long years of my life, almost like a prison. From the first light of morning until my hands were cracked and bleeding, I worked in the steam, stirring heavy tubs, rubbing lye soap into fine clothes, and pressing hot irons over endless sheets and garments. My name is Eliza. In the summer of 1835, people in Charleston knew me not for the spotless laundry I produced, but for what I did to Mistress Cordelia Blackwood in the very copper wash tub where I had lived out most of my days. I was born in 1797 on the Blackwood plantation, just outside Charleston. My mother worked inside the big house, and my earliest memories are of hiding under the tables while she scrubbed the floors. When I was 8 years old, my mama died from fever. Mistress Cordelia had just married Master James Blackwood, and she decided I would be trained to do laundry work. "The girl's hands are small enough to pull stains out," she told the housekeeper, "and her color won't show as much in the wash house." My color? I was light-skinned, so much so that visitors sometimes mistook me for a tanned white servant until they saw my hair. Later, I learned the truth. My father was Master James's older brother, who used to visit from his own plantation up north. He had the first pick of female slaves when he came. It was the sort of arrangement people pretended not to notice, but the proof was in my face. I carried the Blackwood eyes and nose. Maybe that's why Mistress Cordelia hated me from the very start. The laundry house was built apart from the main house. It had to be, with all the smoke, steam, the sharp smell of lye, and the heat of the fires burning day and night. During Charleston's blistering summers, the inside of that room grew so hot even overseers avoided stepping in. That is where I learned my trade under old Ruth, the laundress before me. Her hands had grown too twisted with arthritis to manage the finer work, so she trained me. "Keep your head down and your mouth shut," Ruth warned me on my first day. "The mistress checks every single piece. One spot, one wrinkle, you'll feel the switch. Make 2 mistakes and you'll feel the whip." I learned fast because I had no choice. The work was brutal. I hauled water, stoked fires, stirred heavy linens with a wooden paddle, and scrubbed until my knuckles split open. But the harshest part was Mistress Cordelia's watchful eye and constant punishments. People called her beautiful. She was tall, slim, with auburn hair and perfect white skin untouched by labor. Before marrying into the Blackwood fortune, she had been the darling of Charleston. But beauty didn't make her kind. With Cordelia Blackwood, cruelty was always close at hand. The first time she struck me, I was only 9 years old. I had missed a faint tea stain on her lace handkerchief. Every afternoon, she inspected the laundry. She would lay each item out carefully, run her fingers along the seams, and hold things up to the light. "What is this?" she asked softly, holding up the handkerchief. I stood with my sore, raw hands clasped behind my back, eyes lowered. "A handkerchief, mistress," I answered. Her slap came without warning. My head snapped sideways, and tears filled my eyes. "It's ruined, that's what it is," she said sharply, thrusting the little brown mark before me. "Do you know what this cost? More than you're worth, girl." That night, I went without supper. The next morning, she stood over me while Ruth showed me again how to remove tea stains. "Make sure she learns it properly," Mistress Cordelia ordered. "She may look like her father, but clearly she doesn't have his intelligence." That cruel reference to my father was something I would hear in different forms all my life. Cordelia never admitted the truth openly, but she used it like a weapon, reminding me of who I was with every cutting remark about my features and my skin. By the time I turned 14, Ruth had been sold away, no longer useful, and I became the Blackwood laundress in full. My days started before sunrise. I lit fires under the copper tubs, pumped water from the well, and prepared the soaps and powders for different fabrics. Collars and cuffs needed extra scrubbing. Silks required gentle washing with special Castile soap. Bloodstains from nosebleeds, hunting accidents, or women's monthly cycles had to be treated with cold water first, then carefully cleaned with hydrogen peroxide. I became an expert at dealing with stains, the hidden evidence of lives that even the richest people of Charleston couldn't hide. I knew which men spilled bourbon on their waistcoats, which women smeared their dresses with rouge, and which children wet their beds. The laundry held their secrets, and I kept them all, invisible as I was to the white world around me. Master James Blackwood rarely stepped foot inside the laundry house. He was more interested in his cotton trade and shipping business than the running of his home. When he and Cordelia moved to their Charleston mansion in 1823, leaving the plantation to overseers, his visits became even rarer. But Cordelia, she came every day. No matter how busy her social life was, she always found time to inspect the laundry. As the years went by, Mistress Cordelia's inspections grew even harsher. Nothing I did was ever good enough for her. A sheet might be neatly pressed, but she would ask whether I had used the exact right amount of bluing in the rinse. A dress could be spotless, but she would still question whether the starch had been spread with perfect evenness. "You're slow today," she remarked one stifling afternoon in August of 1835. By then, I was 38 years old, my youth spent in endless steam and lie. "Are you being deliberately lazy, or are you simply incompetent?" she demanded. "Neither, mistress," I answered, keeping my eyes fixed on the petticoat I was ironing. "The heat slows the drying. I'm working as quickly as I can." She gave a small, doubtful sound and stepped closer, studying my hands as I pushed the heavy iron across the fabric. "You know they're bringing in these new mechanical laundry devices up north," she said casually. "Steam-powered. They say one machine can do the work of 3. I stayed quiet. I understood the hidden threat. Machines cost money, but slaves could be sold. "Of course," she continued, running her finger along a shelf to check for dust. "Machines don't make mistakes. They don't talk back. They don't have inconvenient monthly cycles that slow their work." The words cut deep. Only the week before, my bleeding had been unusually heavy. Weak and dizzy, I had dropped a basket of wet linens, which meant washing had to be started over again. "No, ma'am," I said softly. "Machines don't bleed." Something in my tone must have caught her attention, perhaps a trace of the anger I carried inside me every single day. She stepped directly in front of me, forcing me to stop my work. "Look at me," she ordered. I lifted my eyes to hers. Up close, I could see faint lines beginning to form around her eyes and the slight sag beneath her jaw. At 39, Mistress Cordelia was fighting the first signs of age with the same obsession she demanded of her laundry, covering it all with creams and powders. "I see your father in your eyes," she said coldly, almost whispering. "That same defiance, that same belief that rules don't apply." I didn't answer. I just kept my gaze locked on hers. After years of her cruelty, something inside me had changed. It wasn't only the hard calluses on my hands. A shell had grown around what remained of my spirit. She smiled then, a thin, joyless curl of the lips that never touched her eyes. "Perhaps I should tell Mr. Blackwood that you're becoming difficult," she threatened. "He's been talking about buying new kitchen slaves. Your sale could cover the cost nicely." Being sold was her sharpest weapon. It wasn't that I had any love for the Blackwood household. I hated every inch of it, but sale meant the unknown. It could mean being sent deep south, to the cotton or sugar plantations where people lasted months instead of years. Or worse, being sold into one of Charleston's brothels, where my light skin would be sold off as some exotic prize. "I apologize if I offended you, mistress," I said finally, lowering my eyes. "It won't happen again." See that it doesn't. She turned, satisfied with her small triumph. At the doorway she paused. The Ruttledges are coming to dinner tomorrow, she instructed. Their napkins must be flawless. Use the Egyptian linen, not the Irish, and make sure you rinse them with lavender, not rose. Mrs. Ruttledge breaks out in a rash from roses. Then she swept out, leaving behind the faint trace of her costly French perfume. Another mark for me to keep hidden in her clothes when I washed them. That night, back in the tiny room attached to the laundry house where I slept, I sat in the dim light of a tallow candle and studied my hands. The skin on my hands looked far older than my 38 years. Fine scars from live burns crossed every surface, and my nails were split and uneven no matter how hard I tried to keep them neat. My mother had somehow managed to keep her hands soft and lovely, even with her work. She used to tell me, a woman's hands tell her story. What story did mine tell? A life of endless labor. A life of quiet humiliations, piled one on top of another, just like the soiled linens I hauled in and out of the tubs each day. I owned very little of my own, but under a loose floorboard in my small room, I hid 3 precious things. A scrap of blue ribbon my mother once wore in her hair, a tiny carved wooden bird given to me by a kitchen boy before he was sold away, and a straight razor I had found years ago in the master's trash. Its blade was rusty, but still sharp enough to cut. I had never kept it for a clear reason, only as a reminder. A reminder that sharp edges existed, and that tools meant for white men's comfort might, one day, serve another purpose. That night, I took the razor out and pressed it lightly against my palm, watching a thin line of blood appear. I wasn't planning anything, not yet, but something inside me was shifting, like fabric turning in a boiling tub, the dirt slowly lifting free. The next morning brought even heavier demands. Not only were the Ruttledges coming to dinner, but the following day Mistress Cordelia was hosting the monthly meeting of the Ladies' Benevolent Society. The name always stung. These women gathered to discuss charity while being waited on by the very people they enslaved. It meant more work for me, extra tablecloths to be washed and pressed, 20 napkins to be starched until they were stiff and perfect. The mistress's best tea gown bore a mysterious yellow stain that took me nearly an hour to remove. By midday, the laundry house was sweltering. Breathing itself became difficult, and sweat poured down my face and back, stinging the tiny cuts on my hands as I worked. Mariah, one of the house slaves, brought me my meal, a bowl of leftover grits with a piece of salt pork. She lingered in the doorway, fanning herself. "Lord, it's hot as Satan's kitchen in here," she said. "I don't know how you stand it day after day." I shrugged, too weary to waste words. Mariah meant well, but she had the advantage of moving through the big house, working in different rooms at different tasks. My whole world was this: steam, soap, and the endless cycle of dirty to clean to dirty again. "Mistress is in a state today," Mariah added in a lowered voice. "Master's brother is coming down next week, the one from Virginia." My hands froze for just a second over my bowl. Master's brother, my father. Though he had never spoken of it and never claimed me, I had not seen him since I was a child. Whenever he visited, Mistress Cordelia would stay tight-lipped and bitter for days afterward. "She's making us clear out the blue guest room," Mariah continued. "Says it needs 3 days to air. Wants a new mattress ticking, everything perfect." I nodded, trying to seem calm, but inside I was shaking. What would he see if he looked at me now? Would he recognize the child he had helped create? Now a middle-aged woman with gray streaks in her hair and hands ruined by labor. Would he even care? All afternoon, the thought of his visit gnawed at me, pulling my focus from the laundry. By the time Mistress Cordelia swept in for inspection, I was already worn thin from heat and unwelcome memories. She moved through the laundry with her usual sharp eye, criticizing almost everything. The Egyptian linen napkins were not stiff enough. A pillowcase showed the faintest ghost of an old stain. And the tea gown, even after all my work, she declared still bore a hint of yellowing along one seam. "This is unacceptable," she snapped. "The Ruttledges will be here in 3 hours, and these napkins wouldn't even pass for kitchen staff. And what am I supposed to wear if this gown is ruined?" "I can rewash the napkins with extra starch," I said quickly, already figuring how to manage it alongside my other tasks. "And perhaps you could wear the blue silk. It would match the table setting." "The blue silk has a torn lace cuff," she shot back, "which you would know if you kept proper track of my clothing." "I mended the cuff last week, Mistress," I answered carefully. "It's ready to wear." For a brief moment, she looked surprised at my preparedness, but then her face hardened again. "Fine, the napkins must be ready in 2 hours. No excuses." "Yes, Mistress." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "And Eliza, when my brother-in-law arrives next week, you will make yourself scarce. I don't want him distracted by your presence." The meaning was plain. My likeness to the Blackwood family must not be shown to the very man who fathered me. The shame belonged to me for existing, not to him for taking my mother. "Yes, Mistress," I said again, swallowing the bitterness that rose in my throat. After she left, I plunged the napkins into fresh hot water and added the extra starch she demanded. The liquid burned, but my thick calluses barely felt it. As I worked, my thoughts grew darker. Heat, steam, and 18 years of damage, both to my body and to whatever was left of my spirit, pushed my imagination in dangerous directions. What if I didn't hide when my father came? What if I stood in front of him and showed him the living proof of his careless use of my mother? What if Mistress Cordelia had to see, up close, the result of her husband's family's cruelty, every time I sat at the table or crossed the parlor? These were reckless thoughts, but once they arrived, they would not leave. They hung in the steam-filled laundry like a stubborn fog. By evening, the work was done. The napkins were starched stiff, tablecloths ironed smooth enough to shine by lamplight, and the blue silk gown set aside for Mistress Cordelia's dinner with the Ruttledges. But something deep inside me had shifted. Years of simmering resentment had reached a boil, pressing against the thin lid of forced obedience that had kept me in line for so long. The next 3 days passed in a haze of heat and unrelenting labor. August in Charleston was always fierce, but that summer felt determined to break us. The laundry house ran hotter than the air outside, a constant, suffocating oven where I worked 12 to 14 hours most days. My only rest came in those brief hours of darkness when I collapsed onto the small pallet in my room. On the 4th day, the day before Master's brother was due, Mistress Cordelia came for her afternoon inspection looking unusually agitated. Her face was flushed, and her movements were quick and sharp as she handled each piece of linen. "These sheets for the blue room," she said, rubbing her hands over the pressed fabric roughly. "They're not adequate. They must be re-washed. There's a shadow here and here." She pointed to places I could not see any flaw. "Yes, Mistress," I answered without thinking. "I'll re-wash them at once." She continued picking faults as if she were hunting for them. "And these handkerchiefs, the monogram is barely visible. Did you use the proper bluing? This tablecloth is not starched enough. Really, Eliza, it's as if you are deliberately undermining my preparations for Henry's visit." I kept my silence. Her anger had less to do with my work and more to do with the nerves tied up in Henry Blackwood's arrival. Henry always rattled her. His presence shook the order she tried so hard to keep. "Perhaps I should replace you," she said suddenly, her voice cold and calculating. "Find someone who understands the importance of perfection. The Harrisons are selling some of their house slaves next month. I might inquire. The threat was familiar, but the timing felt cruel. After 18 years of ruined hands and endless toil, the thought that I could be discarded so easily sparked a hot, dangerous flame inside me. "As you wish, mistress," I answered, keeping my voice steady though anger rolled under my words. She studied me for a long moment, maybe sensing something different beneath my calm. "Yes, well, we shall see. For now, rewash these sheets. I want them perfect by morning. The blue room must be immaculate for Henry's arrival." After she left, I stood frozen among the damp laundry and swirling steam, a strange calm settling over me like cool water on burning skin. 18 years. 18 years of scolding, threats, and constant cruelty. 18 years of watching my youth disappear into the steam rising from copper tubs. My hands, once smooth brown skin, had hardened into scarred tools of labor. And for what? To keep existing until I was too old, too broken, and then cast aside, sold like old Ruth, or simply worked until my body collapsed. I moved to the largest copper tub, the one reserved for bed linens and heavy sheets, and began preparing the water Mistress Cordelia had deemed unfit. I fed the fire beneath, watching the flames lick at the copper bottom. As I did, an idea began to stir. Not fully formed, more instinct than plan, but insistent. The tub was large enough to hold a person. The water, once heated, scalded bare skin instantly. And the laundry house was far enough from the main house that sounds rarely carried, especially on an August evening with windows shut tight against mosquitoes. Violence had never been something I considered. Even in my darkest moments of resentment, I had turned my anger inward. I knew open defiance meant certain death, but something had shifted. The years of pressure had cracked the mask I wore, and now there was no holding it together. That night, lying on my pallet, aching from the day's labor, I let myself picture what I had only half imagined before. Mistress Cordelia arriving for inspection. The copper tub filled with water just below boiling. Her careless step forward. My sudden shove. The splash. The scream. The lid slamming shut. The thought should have filled me with horror. Instead, it brought a strange peace, like a decision finally made after years of hesitation. I knew the truth. I would never be free of the Blackwoods through ordinary means. I would never save enough from side work to buy my freedom. No loyal service would ever earn me manumission. But this could end the torment. This could give me one terrible moment of power after a lifetime of helplessness. Cordelia Blackwood's perfectly kept hands would finally feel, just once, the scalding heat that had been my daily companion for 18 years. The morning of Henry Blackwood's arrival was as hot and heavy as all the others. I rose before dawn, as always, to begin the work. But today, each task was different. I worked not to please her, but to make sure nothing interfered with what I had decided must be done. I prepared the largest copper tub with special care. I built the fire hotter than usual, added the bluing and soaps for the blue room sheets. By mid-afternoon, when Mistress Cordelia came for inspection, the water would be just below boiling. The hours dragged like years. I washed linens, laid them under the August sun, ironed them smooth. I cleaned and pressed clothing, folded it neatly. The same endless cycle of soil and clean and soil again that had defined my whole existence. At midday, Mariah arrived with my usual meal. She set it down quickly, her face tight with nerves. "The whole house is in chaos," she muttered. "Mistress has already changed her dress 3 times, and Master's shouting about business papers needing to be perfect before his brother arrives." "When does Mr. Henry arrive?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "His carriage was spotted on the road from Savannah an hour ago. He should be here late afternoon." She glanced at the steaming tub. "Lord, that water looks hot enough to boil a person alive." The words made me shiver, even in the suffocating heat. "It needs to be hot for the sheets," I said evenly. "The bluing sets better that way." Mariah nodded, distracted, already turning for the door. "I'd best get back. Mistress wants the silver polished again before tea is served." After Mariah left, I stood before the copper tub, watching the steam curl upward in slow spirals. "Boil a person alive." The words echoed in my head, turning what had been only an idea into something solid. This wasn't just a thought or a symbol. It was real, a choice I could make. But could I truly do it? Could I take a life, even hers? The answer didn't come in words, but in memories. The sting of Mistress Cordelia's slap when I was 9. The burn of lye soap in the tiny cuts across my hands. The ache of muscles forced past their limits every single day. The hollow nights of going to bed hungry, punished for faults I never committed. 18 years. 18 years of cruelty, big and small. 18 years of being treated like property, of watching my body age before its time. Yes, I could do it. More than that, I would. The afternoon crawled forward. The heat inside the laundry house was suffocating, the copper tub holding a steady rolling simmer. I had arranged the room carefully, the sorting table near the tub, the pressing board across the way, leaving a clear path between the door and the water. The blue room sheets were cleaned, dried, and spread neatly on the table, awaiting her inspection. At last, the door opened. Mistress Cordelia swept in, her perfume heavy in the steaming air, her movements sharp with nervous energy. I was pressing handkerchiefs at the far side, my back turned. "Good God, it's stifling in here," she complained. "Can't you open a window, for heaven's sake?" "The steam would warp the frame, Mistress," I answered, setting down the iron and turning toward her. "Master was very clear about avoiding extra repairs." She made a dismissive sound and moved toward the table. "These sheets had better be perfect this time. Henry's carriage has just arrived, and he'll want to settle into his room before dinner." I watched her bend over the linens, her fingers searching for flaws. Now her back was to the copper tub, exactly as I had planned. "This sheet is still yellowed," she snapped, pointing. "Right here along the edge. Are you blind, Eliza, or just incompetent?" "Let me see, Mistress," I said calmly, stepping to her side. I bent low, pretending to study the spot. "Yes, I notice it now. Perhaps the bluing wasn't strong enough, but the tub is ready. It will only take a few minutes to fix." I gestured toward the steaming water. "Well, hurry up then. These must be on the bed within the hour. Henry is very particular about his accommodations." "Yes, Mistress," I replied, lifting the sheet into my arms. Then, as if it were the most natural request in the world, I added, "Would you mind checking the water's temperature? It should be very hot, but not quite boiling, or it might harm the linen." She hesitated. Mistress Cordelia had never once helped with laundry work. She only inspected and criticized. But her nerves over Henry's visit unsettled her usual routines, and she stepped forward, leaning over the tub with a frown. "It looks hot enough to me," she said. "If you could just test it with your finger," I pressed gently, moving closer behind her. "That way I'll know it won't damage the sheet." She leaned in farther, extending one perfectly manicured hand toward the steaming water. "I don't see why I should have to." That was the moment. I let the sheet fall and pushed, hard, both hands driving into her back, with the strength that 18 years of labor had carved into my arms. Her cry was sharp and startled. She flailed for balance, but there was nothing to grasp. Her body tipped forward and crashed into the boiling water with a violent splash. Scalding droplets burst across the floor and stung my arms. Then came the scream. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before, raw, animal, torn from the depths of her being. She writhed in the water, thrashing, desperate to rise, to escape the burning heat swallowing her whole. For a moment I stood frozen, shocked at what I had just done, yet unable to stop what had already begun. Mistress Cordelia surfaced, her scorched face twisting in pain as she gasped and screamed, clawing for the tub's edge. Instinct moved me. I grabbed the heavy wooden lid we used to cover the copper tub and slammed it down on her head, forcing her back under the boiling water. Her body thrashed violently, water sloshing over the sides, hitting the floor in steaming waves. I leaned my full weight against the lid, holding it down as she fought with everything she had left. Her muffled screams gurgled beneath the surface, echoing in the close walls of the laundry house. 18 years, I said aloud, though I doubted she could hear me through the water and the wood. 18 years in this heat. 18 years with your voice cutting me down for every little thing. Her struggles grew weaker. The wild thrashing slowed to uneven jerks. Still, I pressed harder, unwilling to risk her surviving, unwilling to hear her accusations or bear her power again. You threatened to sell me, I continued, my voice strangely calm. After everything I gave, after all these years, you said I was nothing, like my life had no meaning. The movements under the lid were almost gone now, just small spasms, the body's last instinct to cling to life. My hands, I whispered, staring at them as they held the lid steady. Mama said a woman's hands tell her story. What story will they tell now, Mistress? At last, the movements stopped. I waited several more minutes, refusing to let go too soon. Only when I was certain she was gone did I slowly lift the lid. The sight that met me was hardly human. The scalding water had turned her flesh red and blistered, her features warped beyond recognition. Her fine silk dress floated around her like a ghostly shroud, expensive fabric now clinging to death. I lowered the lid again, sealing her inside. Then, with the same discipline that had guided my work for 18 long years, I began cleaning. Every splash, every drop of water on the floor, I wiped away until the room looked untouched. No trace could remain. When the laundry house was spotless, I stoked the fire beneath the tub until the water boiled harder. Heat erased stains, I knew that well. The most stubborn stains always needed time and fire. Then I gathered what little I owned. Mama's blue ribbon, the carved wooden bird, and the straight razor I had never used. I wrapped them in a clean cloth and tucked them into my pocket. Finally, I sat down on the stool in the corner and stared at the steaming tub. I knew discovery would come. A laundress who disappeared would draw suspicion. Mistress Cordelia's absence would rattle the house. Someone would search here, and the copper tub would give up its secret. But for now, for this brief space of time, I was not just a slave, and not yet a fugitive. I was something in between. A woman who had taken her fate into her own hands, even through a terrible, irreversible act. A woman whose hands had written their own story at last. The tub bubbled in the center of the room, the lid rattling faintly with pressure like a pot left too long on the stove. 18 years, and Cordelia Blackwood had never noticed the pressure inside me, the human vessel she had pushed past the breaking point. Now she boiled, not me. And through the horror, I felt something I had almost forgotten existed, the weight and release of choice. The waiting ended sooner than I expected. Less than an hour later, a sharp knock came at the door. "Eliza," Mariah's voice was urgent. "Eliza, are you in there? Mistress is missing and Master Henry is asking for her." I stood, moving quickly to block the tub from sight. "I'm here," I called, my voice steady. "Just finishing the blue room sheets." The door opened. Mariah stepped in, her face etched with worry. "Have you seen Mistress? She came to check the linens, but she never returned. Master James is beside himself, with his brother here and no wife to greet him. She was here, I answered evenly. About an hour ago. She looked over the sheets, said they needed another wash. Then she left, said she had to change her dress before meeting Master Henry. The lie felt easy, worn from years of small deceptions needed to survive in a house where truth could be dangerous. Mariah stared past me at the steaming tub. Are those the sheets in there now? They'll never dry in time for Master Henry tonight, she fretted. Different batch, I said quickly. The blue room sheets are drying in the sun. They'll be ready within the hour. She hesitated, then seemed to accept it and hurried back toward the main house, her mind already caught up in the crisis there. If you see Mistress, tell her to come quickly, she begged. Master James is beside himself and the cook doesn't know whether to delay dinner. I promised I would, though I knew I'd never have the chance to deliver that message. Once Mariah left, I went to the window and watched her run. Searchers would come next, the house slaves first, then maybe field hands if Cordelia remained missing long enough. I had maybe an hour before they looked more closely here, an hour to choose my next move. Running seemed obvious at first, to slip away during the confusion. But where would I go? A black woman alone with no free papers and no permission to travel would be stopped at the first checkpoint, dragged back, or jailed once my link to the missing mistress was found. Running without a plan would be suicide. I looked at the copper tub, still bubbling in the center of the room. What if there were no body to discover? What if, like the worst stains, every trace could be erased and nothing remained but clean cloth? The idea was monstrous and practical at once. I had come too far to balk at one last terrible act. So I stoked the fire until the water boiled violently. Then, with my hands trembling, I lifted the lid. What remained no longer looked like the proud woman who had tormented me for 18 years. The boiling water had done its work. Flesh had separated, features were unrecognizable. I will not describe what followed. Some things are too gruesome to recount. Some memories are better left locked away. Know only that by the time the search reached the laundry house, about 2 hours later, nothing incriminating remained. The copper tub held only water and the harsh lye soap we used for the heaviest washing. The floor was spotless. The blue room sheets sat pressed and folded, ready to be carried back to the house. I stood among it all, my hands raw from work and worse things, my face arranged into the mask of subservience I had honed over decades. Master James paced at the door, tension written across his face. Search everything, he ordered the house slaves who had followed him. Every corner, every cupboard, she must be somewhere. They looked, turning out cupboards and checking under beds, but found nothing unusual. The laundry house was exactly as it always was, hot, humid, smelling of starch, soap, and steam. Eliza, Master James said at last, turning his attention to me. When did you last see Mrs. Blackwood? Around 2 hours ago, Master, I replied, eyes lowered in the proper pose. She came to check the blue room sheets, but said they needed another wash. Then she said she would change her dress before meeting Master Henry and left. He studied me briefly, perhaps nodding something he couldn't name, but his worry for his wife outweighed any suspicion of a slave he had barely noticed for years. If she returns, send word to the house at once, he instructed, and led the search party back toward the main house. When I was alone again, the full weight of what I had done crashed over me. I had killed a woman, dissolved her body in the tub where I had washed her linens for 18 years, and lied to her husband's face. Each of those acts was enough to doom me. Together, they marked a point of no return. No matter what came next, I would never be the same person I had been before that day. The woman I had been, the obedient drudge who endured endless criticism with downcast eyes and a bitten tongue, was gone as Mistress Cordelia herself. In her place stood someone new, Someone capable of violence calculated and cold. Someone who could dispose of a body with clinical precision, then look the master of the house in the eye and lie without trembling. Someone dangerous. The search for Mistress Cordelia stretched through the evening and into the night. Lanterns bobbed across the property like restless stars. Slaves and neighboring white men scoured the grounds, checked the road to town, asked at friends' houses where she might have gone. Theories multiplied quickly. Perhaps she had suffered an attack of nerves at her brother-in-law's arrival and sought solitude. Perhaps she had gone to make a last-minute purchase for dinner and met with an accident. Some whispered she had been abducted by runaway slaves or criminals from the docks. No one suggested she was dead. No one looked at the laundress's raw, red hands and imagined what they had done. I worked through the chaos, never pausing. I delivered the blue room sheets to the house, then returned to finish the day's tasks. To stop or break routine would have drawn attention I could not afford. So I washed, ironed, folded, as I had done for 18 years. The familiar motions brought a strange comfort, steadying me while my mind roiled with darker thoughts. By nightfall, I retreated to my small room off the laundry house. I had no plan yet, no path forward, only the knowledge that I must eventually flee. But flight required money, papers, and a destination, none of which I possessed. All I had were my 3 small treasures and the terrible knowledge of what the copper tub had held. Sleep came late and badly. My dreams were thick with steam and boiling water, with Cordelia rising from the tub like a spirit of vengeance. Her flesh melted away, yet her voice sharp and intact, calling my name in the same tone of scorn she had always used. I woke before dawn, as always, and set about my work. My body moved automatically, lighting fires, pumping water, preparing soap and starch. Only once everything was underway did I let myself think again about what had happened and what must come next. By morning, new developments had unfolded. Master Henry, instead of leaving during the family crisis, took command of the search with an intensity that made my heart lurch. He divided the grounds into sections for systematic inspection, sent riders into Charleston to summon the police, and pressed both house and field slaves into service. She wouldn't simply vanish, I overheard him tell Master James as they passed near the laundry house. Cordelia was many things, but not impulsive or careless. Something happened to her, James, and I intend to discover what. His certainty chilled me. Henry Blackwood was not a man easily deceived. If he committed himself to uncovering the truth, how long before his gaze fell fully on the laundry house and on me? By midday, the search widened. They dragged the ornamental pond, peered down wells, probed cisterns. Talk grew of an accident. Perhaps she had fallen, struck her head, and drowned. Few wanted to voice darker suspicions. Few, that is, except Master Henry. That afternoon, he appeared in my doorway, tall and grim, his shadow cutting across the steaming room. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Eliza," he said evenly, "I need to speak with you about yesterday." I set down the iron, forcing my face into neutrality. "Yes, Master Henry." "You were likely the last to see my sister-in-law alive," he continued, his eyes sweeping the room with slow calculation. "Tell me again exactly what happened when she visited here." I repeated the same account I had given Master James. Cordelia's dissatisfaction with the blue room sheets, her mention of changing clothes, her departure toward the house. Nothing more. "And that was all," he pressed. "No unusual behavior, no visitors, no interruptions." "No, sir," I answered softly. "Just the usual inspection." He nodded, but his gaze lingered everywhere. The corners, the shelves, the hearth, and finally on the copper tub. It simmered now with fresh linens, clean water, and soap, as if it had never been anything more. "That's quite a piece of equipment," he observed, moving closer. For the larger laundry, I assume. Yes, sir, I said, steady as I could manage. Sheets, tablecloths, curtains, anything too big for the small tubs. He stood over it, watching the steam curl upward, his face unreadable. How hot does the water get? His question jolted me, but I kept my face steady. Hot enough to remove stubborn stains, sir. But we're careful not to let it actually boil when linens are in it. That can ruin delicate fabrics. I see. He continued his slow tour of the room, inspecting the tables, the shelves, and the flat irons lined up by size near the pressing board. And the waste water, where does it go when you're done with a batch? There's a drainage channel beneath the floor, sir. It runs out to the ditch behind the laundry house, which empties into the creek at the edge of the property. Danger prickled along my skin. If he checked the drainage, would he find traces of what had been washed away the day before? I had scrubbed every inch, but had I been thorough enough? Interesting, he murmured, then turned back to me. Eliza, did my sister-in-law ever say she was afraid of anyone, any conflicts with people in Charleston? The question surprised me. Not to me, sir. Mistress Cordelia didn't confide in the household. No, I suppose she wouldn't. A thin note of bitterness creased his voice. Cordelia always kept strict distance from the staff, even back at our Virginia plantation. I wondered if he meant other distances, too, the ones that had made me who I was. Did he suspect his brother had fathered a child? Did he see the family likeness Mistress Cordelia resented so much? Well, he said at last, if anything unusual comes to mind, anything at all about yesterday or the days before, come straight to me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. I'm staying in the blue room. You know which one that is. Yes, sir, I answered. Good. If anything occurs to you, no matter how trivial it seems, come to me directly. He set the object on the sorting table. I looked down. A silver dollar caught the light on the rough wood, payment for information, or perhaps a test of my honesty. Thank you, sir, I said, not touching the coin. I've told everything I know. He watched me for a long moment, unreadable, then nodded and left, closing the door behind him. The silver dollar sat there, gleaming in the sunlight. Blood money, in a way, a coin that paid for the lies that hid my secret. I needed money if I was ever to leave Charleston. This single coin wouldn't get me far, but it was a start. After a pause, I picked it up and slid it beneath the loose floorboard with my other small treasures. Necessity outweighed whatever shame might cling to it. The search for Mistress Cordelia dragged on for 3 more days, slowly losing its initial force. No trace surfaced, no garments, no jewelry, no sign of struggle anywhere on the property. It was as if she had simply vanished between the laundry and the house. Master James' frantic panic cooled into a confused, wandering grief. Master Henry grew only more determined. Someone knows something, I overheard him tell the Charleston investigator. A woman doesn't disappear without a trace unless someone has removed that trace. His suspicions were sensible, but they had not yet fallen on me. How long before they did? How long until some fragment, an untouched button, a scrap of lace missed in my cleaning, tied Mistress Cordelia's disappearance to this place? On the 4th night after the murder, I made my choice. I had a small store now. The silver dollar from Master Henry, a few coins from extra laundry I'd done for neighbors, and the straight razor tucked beneath my floorboard, tool, talisman, or weapon if needed. Not much, but perhaps enough to get me out of Charleston to somewhere a single black woman might find work and disappear into anonymity. No slave could travel openly without their owner's permission or a paper proving freedom. Luckily, the chaos around Mistress Cordelia's disappearance had upset the household's usual order. Locks left unlocked, drawers pushed aside, the careful hiding of important papers neglected in the rush. While delivering clean linens to the main house, I slipped into Master James's study and found a folder of household documents. Among deeds, bills of sale, and other records, I discovered blank travel forms that needed only a signature to authorize a slave to travel on their owner's business. There was even a bill of sale for me from 18 years earlier. I took one of the blank forms, and for comparison, a paper that bore Master James Blackwood's signature. Forgery was another crime to add to my list, but by then it felt small compared with what I had already done. That night, by the weak light of a candlestick, I carefully copied his signature onto the travel permission form. The paper authorized the bearer, Eliza Lundress, to travel to Savannah to obtain special laundry supplies not available in Charleston. It allowed 2 weeks for the journey there and back, more than enough time to vanish, to head north or west to a place where a missing Charleston mistress would not follow my name. With the forged papers hidden against my skin and my few possessions wrapped in a small bundle, I prepared to leave. One more full day of routine to avoid arousing suspicion. One more night waiting until the house was quiet. Then I would slip away before dawn and move as far as I could from the place of my crime. That final day felt endless. Every knock at the laundry door made my heart sprint. Every look from another house servant felt like accusation. The copper tub, now returned to its ordinary work, seemed to mock me with its steady, innocent boil. But no one knew. No one suspected. I was still Eliza the laundress, the same quiet worker I had been for 18 years. If my hands trembled or my answers came a beat slower, the household was too consumed with its own chaos to notice. When night fell, I finished my tasks, washing, ironing, folding, delivering, everything in perfect order, as Cordelia would have demanded. This last act of care felt like a small, bitter salute to the woman I had killed. One final instance of obedience before I left her world forever. I did not sleep. I sat on the edge of my pallet and waited for the estate to quiet. Midnight passed, then 1:00 At 3:00 in the morning, the Blackwood grounds lay deep and still. It was time. I gathered my bundle, tucked the forged papers into my bodice, and eased the door open. Moonlight filtered through the laundry windows, turning the copper tub a pale silver. For a moment I paused and laid my scarred hand against its curved rim, the very thing that had been instrument of both my oppression and my rebellion. This tub had taken a life, and with it had dissolved the last traces of my enforced submission. "Goodbye, mistress," I whispered to the empty room and to whatever ghost might linger there. "The stain of you is gone." Then I moved, silent as steam, toward the road. Whatever awaited me, freedom or capture, life or death, would be my own making. For the first time in 38 years, my hands would write their own story. The night air felt cool after the laundry's heat. Stars scattered above like drops on pressed linen. Ahead lay an uncertain path, dangerous but no longer mapped by another person's will. I had boiled my mistress in the wash tub, dissolved her body until no trace remained, lied and forged and planned my flight. Each act had been a choice, not the obedientness I once was, but the violent decision of the woman I had become in that August heat, acting for the simplest and most urgent of human needs: freedom. I followed the road toward the Charleston docks, hopping to find passage and disappear. For a long time after, people told different endings. One version said Eliza made it to Philadelphia and lived out her days free, though tormented by nightmares of boiling water until her death in 1868. The Blackwoods never learned the whole truth. Master Henry died insisting someone in the household had murdered Cordelia. The copper tub stayed in the laundry house for many years, used by other hands that never knew its secret. Eliza's desperate act echoes down the years as a stark reminder of how brutal oppression can drive someone to desperate measures. If stories like this, those hidden in the shadows of American slavery, move you, join our community. Subscribe to hear more untold truths. Your support helps keep these difficult but vital narratives alive.